Last year, I shared my honest, unfiltered truths about what it was like to live in Belize. And today, I have an ultimate Belize travel planning guide. Whether you're visiting there for the first time or considering relocating, this is the one you want to bookmark. And stay tuned for the end, where I have a special update about Belize. Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're new, I'm Lily. I'm a travel journalist. So last year, I did a video about living in Belize and what it was like and shared my honest take. I've put together the ultimate guide that will save you lots of stress. Planning stress. Let's dig in. First, there are 4 key pillars to a well-rounded Belize experience. Each of these elements should be part of your trip. A city, rainforest area, key island, and a cultural hub. Some of these are often close to each other, sometimes not, but these 4 elements will help you get a really full, well-rounded image of Belize. City. That means Belize City, Belmopan, Punta Gorda. Most of you will pass through a major town or a city when you travel to Belize. Belize has 6 districts and each of them has a main area where you do commerce, your banking, etc. and you pass through when you're driving. By the way, everyone has to pass through Belize City. Most everyone who flies in internationally, airport is in Belize City. And when you come out of the airport, usually some people take a drive to the water taxi or they will drive to their next destination by car. Others will catch a flight directly from international airport to the next stop on a domestic airline. By the way, don't skip Belize City just because everyone tells you to. If you're going to live in Belize, you'll want to know about Belize City one way or another. It's a major cultural heart of the country where the Kriol culture dominates, but it's also a place where people do commerce. It's a banking hub, and there's a decent restaurant and dining and nightlife scene there, cultural scene as well with museums. Of course, there are shady parts of town that you want to avoid, but it is an important city in the history of Belize. So we covered the city pillar. Next is the rainforest pillar. These are inland areas that are near rainforests and Maya sites. Cayo District, the Toledo District in the deep south, or parts of Stan Creek in the south as well. All of these places are rich in national parks, rainforest areas for hiking, and wildlife. Third pillar is the Key Island, places like Key Cocker, Ambergris Key. You also have islands like Tobacco Key that are smaller in the south that do have people who live there and who are in tourism mostly. And then you have the cultural hub, which is the fourth and important pillar. These are places that are home to indigenous groups in Belize that you can have cultural experiences in, but also meet and get to know what it's like in the rural side of Belize. So these are places like Dangriga, Hopkins Village, which is more touristy, or Maya villages in the Toledo district, some of which offer homestays for you to experience, and chocolate tours, and hiking and organic farming. So those are the pillars. And depending on what your interest is, depending on how much time you have, you can pair them up in different ways, or you can do a whole complete trip that has all of these pillars and repeat it over and over using that same format. But because I'm about making your life easier, I have created combo itineraries for you to try and save you some of that headache. Combo number 1 is the most popular version of what most first-time visitors to Belize choose. This is the classic highlight: Maya ruins, Shinantunich in Cayo, jungle adventures, and reef time. So you have Belize City where you pass through, then you go to the Cayo district, perhaps stay in San Ignacio or outside of it. Then you have a stop in San Pedro or Key Cocker in the Northern Keys. This is the very popular choice that most people do for a first time, and it's perfectly fine. In fact, that's what I did. I stayed first in Ambergris Key, San Pedro. I did a day trip to Key Cocker, regretted not choosing Key Cocker as a stayover. And then I went to the Cayo district and I stayed in Bullet Tree Falls Village just outside of San Ignacio. Such a great choice because it was close enough to town, but outside enough that I was getting a more authentic experience. Combo number 2. This is the cultural immersion mixed with nature, from Garifuna coastal towns to inland rainforest areas and Maya villages. This is for travelers who are willing to go a little bit more off the beaten path than the classic tour. So you go through Belize City, then you go to Dangriga on the east coastal area of Belize that is a Garifuna cultural hub. You can do a day trip to Tobacco Key. You can also day trip to Hopkins Village, which is just an hour away. You can hike Coxcomb Jaguar Preserve. You'd be really lucky to spot a jaguar. Probably won't. Some people do. I never have in all my years in Belize. And then there's also the Maya Center where you can have Maya cultural experiences and exchange and learn about the Maya. Combo number 3. This is for the beach bums, people who are looking for a sense of what the beaches are like. You go through Belize City, then you go to Placencia Peninsula. You fly there on one of the domestic airlines, Maya Air or Tropic. Spend time on this really long beach town that has a lot of foreigners and expats. and lots of bars and restaurants lined along the beach and off the beach. And it also has a lagoon. It's a really nice sort of very laid back seaside lifestyle. And it's close enough to rainforest areas. It's close enough to Garifuna cultural hubs like St. Bite. Combo number 4 is more offbeat. Now we're getting to offbeat territory. If you want to skip more of the tourist trail, you can go south to the Toledo district. It does have tourism activities, obviously, but it's still very far enough that you don't get as many tourists. It's known as the Deep South, but it has very, very rich experiences like Maya homestays or Maya villages where you can do day trips, or you could have activities with a women-run Maya women's group that shows you some of their traditions. And this is not just for show. This is like their way of living and their heritage that they've preserved. That's one of the things that Belize does really well, by the way, from a tourism standpoint. You also have waterfalls, national parks. It's very lush. It has a lot of fishing off the coast. It has keys that you can go on day trips to the Snake Keys and even further than that, Sabodia Keys, which are amazing, by the way. So this is for people who are more curious, culturally open, looking for a more rural/town life, small town lifestyle. Combo number 5 is even more lesser visited than the Deep South. This is rural slow travel in the north of the country, Orange Walk, and especially Corozal. Very close to the Mexico border where you can go shopping in Chetumal. There are Mennonite villages. There are farming towns, coastal living communities. Corozal is a small town. There are also expat hubs like Consejo Shores. You go through Belize City, drive through Belmopan to see what the administrative capital is like, and then you could keep on driving north to Orange Walk, which has, by the way, gorgeous new river. It's called the New River, where you can go wildlife watching on the water for howler monkeys, see Lamanai, which is an important Maya site, stay in lodges there, and then you can continue to Corozal, which is a seaside town and has actually a significant East Indian community. By the way, Sarteneja is a fishing village as well. The wooden boat building tradition in Belize is out of Sarteneja. It's very small. It is remote, but reached from Corozal, and you can also catch a ferry that connects you to San Pedro. So the question is, which one of these combos fits you? Which one do you feel like trying out first, second, third? Can you fit all of this in one trip? Wow, you could if you had the time and the money. I sure was able to do it. Many of these versions of combos over the years as I was working on my Moon Belize tourist guidebook. That's why I know that these are the key pillars, and this is the best way to frame your trip and get a really good sense of the country. You don't need to pay somebody to take you there and pay a gazillion to see the country, but obviously if that's your choice, you can. But if not, save this video and you can plan it that way. The currency is one of the easiest things to handle in Belize. 2 Belizean dollars equals 1 US dollar. Most places, if not all, will take the US dollar, so you won't have to worry about it. But I prefer always to have local currency if I can. And it's very easy to go to the ATM, one of the official ATMs that you see, perhaps that has a Visa logo on it, and take money out in Belizean dollars. Only take out the amount of money that you need for your next 2 days or 3 days. Don't have a ton of cash on you, please. Make sure you always lock your valuables. If you bring any, try not to bring as many. But if you do, if you have electronics, make sure you lock them in your hotel room. Don't leave them lying around. I know somebody who got their laptop stolen from their hotel room in San Pedro. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but be wise. You could also lock your stuff in your suitcase and bring a lock. Taxis are great for short distances. Obviously, if you're in a tourist area, you can expect to pay premium for your ride. People rent cars, which is also a great idea if you're going on a road trip from, say, Belize City to Cayo to the west and then go south to Stan Creek. That you get a really good sense of the country that way. Domestic flights are very reliable, and they have schedules and websites where you can book online. Maya Air, Tropic Air, and they go to the major towns and areas in all 6 districts of Belize. The water taxi is also quite reliable. There's a set schedule and set payments. You can do it online, or you can do it at the office at the water taxi terminal in Belize City and in different places that you catch a water taxi. The most popular water taxi service obviously is from between Belize City and the Northern Keys, San Pedro and Cape Cocker. Water taxi to Cape Cocker is that's the first stop, so it's shorter. It's about 45 minutes, 40 minutes. And then the one to San Pedro is about an hour and change. Keep that in mind if you're not comfortable about boats and being on the water. They're generally very safe. They can get crowded sometimes if it's peak times during the year. Buses are probably the least reliable option to travel around Belize, but they do exist. If you're going from, say, Belize City to Punta Gorda, you get the big coach buses. But if it's in between, say, Belize City and Belmopan or San Ignacio, it's the small chicken buses that I've told you about before in my previous video. By the way, if you haven't seen my video about living in Belize, you can catch it here. And also remember that everything changes all the time in Belize. Schedule, or somebody shows up late, etc. The tour guides are generally pretty good. The tour companies are very reliable and they show up on time. And there's a reason for that. They get paid really well for your tours. Most Belizeans speak Kriol. In fact, there was a time when somebody said to me, if you don't speak Kriol, you're not Belizean. Each ethnic group also has their own languages in Belize, and there are many cultural groups that we're going to talk about just now. But learning a few Kriol phrases is going to go a long way for you when you're visiting or thinking of relocating there. So the main cultural groups in Belize live in specific areas where they're originally from, but they also live all over the country because obviously jobs take people everywhere, including family, right? The Kriol are the majority in Belize City and lowland areas. They are descendant of enslaved Africans and British settlers who came there during colonial times. But obviously you'll find Kriol folks all over Belize. And Belizean Kriol is actually the lingua franca in Belize. Everyone speaks Kriol. The Garifuna are on the eastern and southern coastal Belize areas. Those are their original areas where their ancestors landed years ago. And this means Dangriga, Hopkins, Saint Bite, for example. Descendants of West Africans and indigenous Arawaks, the Garifuna have a very rich heritage, a culture that involves drumming, dancing, spiritual practices. All of these have been recognized by UNESCO. The Maya are obviously the first inhabitants of Belize. There are three groups, the Quechua, the Mopan, the Yucatec Maya. They all have their languages. You can find them in Toledo district, in the Cayo district, and in many other parts. The Mestizo are a mix of Spanish and indigenous groups, and most of them are from the north. The Mennonite communities, there are modern Mennonites, traditional Mennonites. Most of the Mennonites in Belize are descendants of German-speaking communities. They migrated to Canada, Mexico in the early 20th century, and a bunch of them came over from Mexico to Belize in the 1950s, and they were offered religious freedom, land for farming. The Belizean government gave them religious and educational autonomy and tax concessions. They are primarily in Spanish Lookout, in Shipyard, and in Blue Creek. East Indian community, who are in Corozal mostly, and Punta Gorda, but obviously also in other parts of the country, were brought to Belize by the British in the 1800s, and they were brought there as indentured servants and laborers after the abolition of slavery in 1838. So they came from India and they worked in logging and agriculture. You also have communities of Chinese, Lebanese. All of these groups have their own cuisines and their own cultures and celebrations and music, and that is truly what makes Belize the most unique, special little place in the world. There are people who say that, well, yeah, but don't paint a romanticized version because we don't necessarily all love each other. That may be true. There may be some tension between some of them, or, stereotypes and reactions, but overall, compared to other countries, they certainly live peacefully across the country. There is no such thing as ethnic conflict or strife in the way that you might see, say, in Ethiopia. So it's not perfect, but it's definitely peaceful. Okay, there are typical activities in Belize. Maya site visits, snorkeling, diving, caving, like the ATM cave that's become so famous and overcrowded, river tubing. By the way, I did the ATM cave when we were still allowed to bring in cameras and still a few people were going in. So I feel very lucky. I did it in like 2011. And then at some point it became so crowded and so popular that somebody dropped their camera on one of the skeleton remains and they banned cameras. Anyways, other things really incredible to do is river tubing, Garifuna drumming classes, and traditional cooking of Garifuna food in Hopkins. You can hike medicinal routes in the rainforest. Food tasting, there are food tours in San Pedro. You can explore markets like in San Ignacio. You can go to the beach. I mean, there's just a lot to do, right? It's not super cheap. You'll find tours are mostly $100 and up per person, whether you're hiking to some amazing cave or going snorkeling. You get the quality though and value. Okay, just a brief pause. If you're planning to move to Belize or you're interested in scouting it and exploring to see if it's a possibility, then I've created a brand new 7-day Belize cultural itinerary and scouting guide for you. I've been working on this and it will save you so much time and effort. It is packed with my honest recommendations from my years of living there, from where to stay, where the owners will be, more interesting to talk to where to eat, what activities to take part in, and some of the Belizean owned hotels that I've personally stayed at and will recommend to my best friends, cultural tips and what to avoid, how to actually get a feel for life in Belize. You can stretch it over a 2 week period or have a 7 day trip. It doesn't matter. You can use this guide over and over, and it will save you hours of research and take away some of the fear that you might feel about doing this alone. Download it in the link in the description, and you will be on your way to planning your trip, or check out the first pinned comment below. One of the reasons people pick Belize also is because English is the national language, unlike its neighboring countries in Central America where Spanish is spoken. It has a stable democracy. I mean, this is not a place where you have coups. There's never any issue when there are elections. Now, having said that, petty crime does tend to happen in areas, particularly where there are tourists. So you want to be mindful, not leave your stuff lying around, like I mentioned before, and don't flash valuables. Yes, corruption does exist in Belize, like many countries. In fact, many crimes go unsolved. This is something you should know. A lot of people go on vacation in Belize, fall in love with it immediately, and we're like, I want to buy a house here. I want to move here right away. I'm ready to buy. Someone comes along who's probably another expat who's been there for years and probably has the gift of gab and sells you somehow into buying this perfect land or perfect property that you've just seen, and he can help you with that and blah blah blah. Don't fall for that immediately. Please do your due diligence. Hire a vetted lawyer, real estate lawyer in Belize. Make sure you know the laws as well, aside from hiring a lawyer. Know how the whole system works before you shake somebody's hand and say okay or buy land. There have been foreigners that have been scammed over the years, but I share more about that in the guide. This is for my fellow solo female travelers, or at least I was solo when I was in Belize. This is my advice for you. It is generally safe for women to travel all over Belize by themselves, whether you are a young female or whether you're a senior woman, 40 plus, such as myself. I say senior, it sounds really weird. Anyways, yes, I did it. It was fine. I also, however, didn't take crazy risks. So, I didn't stay out late by myself unaccompanied. I made sure I had contacts or friends with me. When we did go out in a group, we always took each other home. No woman was ever left to walk home or go home alone. We made sure that everyone rotated and everyone got home safely. Now, you might not know anyone when you first move there. Make sure that you have a safe way back to your room or home. There are places where walking at night is perfectly fine. People do it. Placencia Village, for example, the sidewalk is well known, and people go from bar to hotel to their room that way. But the less risk you take, the better. Yes, there is significant catcalling in Belize. That was definitely one of my not so favorite parts, and it happens. And I've developed a technique over the years in the Caribbean where they would say something to me while I'm walking, and I was like, I will acknowledge it. Sometimes if you don't acknowledge it, they get aggressive, and I don't really want to attract that kind of attention. So unfortunately, sometimes I'm forced to be like responsive, but I don't smile or anything like that. I'm just like, all right. And when I say that, they're like, oh, she's she knows how to handle herself, and they just move on. And sometimes I don't respond. Actually, it depends. But I'm just saying, don't let that rattle you. Also, if somebody asks you where you're staying, if you're solo female and randomly they come and say, oh, where are you staying? What's going on? How long you been here? How long you staying? And unless it's a tour guide, it's usually somebody who's opportunistic. I remember one time I was in Hopkins Village at a local restaurant, and this dude off of nowhere just came up to my table while I was having lunch, asking me weird things like, how long was I here for and where was I staying and all this stuff. And I wasn't like aggressive. I just looked at him and I said, why are you asking me that? Why you want to know where I stay? And he's kind of gave me a double. He's like, no, just asking whatever. I said, man, can I give you some advice? Never ask a female tourist who's by herself where she's staying. That's not a good man. Not a good look, And he was like, oh, okay, no problem, whatever. And he just like went away. And also watch your drinks when you're going out. That's normal everywhere. For women who are looking for community, and this is a question that I get a lot, especially from the more senior of us, many people meet up at activities. Maybe it's a yoga class, maybe it's a hiking group, maybe it's female-owned businesses, and you patronize them and you make friends with them, and then they share stuff with you of stuff that's happening. It's great to meet entrepreneurs. Usually they have their own little circles and their activities, and you can join in that way. And you can also reach out to the local community group or Rotary Club, some kind of volunteer initiative that you can be a part of when you're moving somewhere long-term. If you're considering moving to Belize, don't move blindly to some remote village, just like you're a Peace Corps volunteer or something. Like if this is your retirement or something, or, and ladies, this is for you too. Someone asked me about how do you move somewhere and you're safe living alone, will you be isolated? I mean, that's the whole point of going, visiting, feeling more at ease with the place and not being afraid, right? If you're just trying it out, then maybe you're better off being around busier areas rather than remote rural corners of the country. And then you can eventually move away after you've become acclimated to Belize and the culture and all of that, because it's already a lot to take in when you're new in a place. Okay, so that's one way to mitigate the fear. But essentially, most places in Belize are safe as long as you're not, doing anything crazy or meeting with random people, and you're vetting your friends and your surroundings. And then think about the lifestyle that you want. Belize is absolutely beautiful, fantastic, it's fun, but it's not a utopia. Things happen just like anywhere else. So stay open-minded, vigilant, and curious, but not naive. There are a lot of people telling you how to move to Belize, but they're not really also telling you some of the more important points of what it is to be a responsible traveler and a responsible resident once you decide to go there. There are lots of issues that you need to be aware of, and you need to understand what your part is in these dynamics. Belize has been on a growth spurt in the last decade or so, and it is in part through tourism. It's also partly through all the foreigners who have moved there to retire and all of the incentives that have been given to people to retire there through the Belize retirement program. They've bought homes. They've also opened businesses. Many of them have also taken away business from locals that way in small towns, like, for example, Hopkins. I think I've spoken about this before. Anyway, some call it gentrification in Hopkins, in Placencia, in San Pedro. Some people call it progress. But even as recently as this week, I read something about San Pedro, Ambergris Key, and how the north of the island, there is dredging happening there, and yet another development taking place that people didn't know, locals didn't really know about, and are now pushing back on. And it's, going to harm the reef and the corals and all of that in that area. So this is something that is happening a lot more often. Other dynamics that I've personally noticed as well, for example, on Cape Cocker, that used to be an island with low-rise, lovely middle-rise buildings, and now you have, 3-story, 4-story eyesores that have been built by foreigners also investing in the island and building their own thing. So all of this is to say that you should always try to support Belizean-owned businesses, or the businesses of those who've been in the country for a really long time, or, investigate who the owner is and support people who are supporting the country for real and not just for their own self-interests. I know that takes research. My guide will help with that. But also think about your own dynamics. Belizeans are very hospitable people, and they're always welcoming to foreigners, but at the same time, you don't want to be part of a move to strip people of their backyard or take over their businesses because you've just opened your shiny little shop. Generally, Belizeans, as I said, are friendly. Becoming friends with someone there takes time, it takes trust, which makes sense. But if someone rushes to be your friend, is constantly on your back, then it's possibly a red flag, Just keep that in mind. And if you're staying long-term, lastly, there are many ways that you can be part of the larger community. You can volunteer your time. You can show up and purchase stuff at bake sales that are fundraisers for a good cause. You can contribute your skills if you like, where it's needed. Just go with the flow, and everyone will be happy to have you as a positive new resident to their area. But again, make sure you know where you're going and what you bring when you decide to move to a place like Belize. That's a wrap, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to get your copy of the Belize Cultural Itinerary and Scouting Guide. The link is in the description below and as a pinned comment as well. It has a lot more detail, as I said, to inspire your trip, with day-to-day activities and suggestions and prompts to point you in the right direction based on my years of living and traveling in Belize. If this video helped you, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave a comment or your questions below so that we can all exchange and learn from each other. It really, really helps me to grow this channel and keep this content that is honest about travel coming to you guys, and to grow this community here at Tourism Lens. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.